Here we are. Near the end of the book of Revelation, Reg. It's hard to believe that we flew through it. There's much more to be said. We were just, believe it or not, just skimming the surface. But looks like we might make it to the end today, as long as it just drizzles out there and doesn't do any of the...
We don't get any boomers?
Yes, it's all gone by.
Yeah.
So now we just have peaceful rain. Okay, so we have folks listening and folks who will be listening. We appreciate the thousands of hits. We expect many, many more. All right, let's pray for the Spirit. We ask in Jesus' name, Lord, our Heavenly Father, you promise to send forth the Spirit in the name of Jesus to give us the measure of your Spirit and to give power so that the great reprophesying that is to come may begin with us. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Here's something. What is that thing called, Reggie, that thing there?
Chiasm.
That's a chiasm. Where's the important part of the chiasm?
Right in the middle.
Yeah.
That would be E.
E, yeah. The triumph of the Lamb and the 144,000 martyrs, who are identical to the great multitude. As one of my professors said, well, I don't know. Let's just say that they were the perpetual house guests of the great multitude. Right? They were always there. All right, so we're down. We're coming to the section, the church settled in the new earth. Oh, we have to take a moment. This is very important. You need a pencil or a pen, depending on how classy you are and how far you got in school. You need a pencil or a pen and at least the back of an envelope. Okay? Why don't you do that while we look at the next slide? Oh, Act 7, the church in the new earth. New heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, measuring the city, light of the city, life in the city. I'm coming soon in the unsealed book. Okay, let's see. Then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues and spoke to me, saying, these are the 7 angels who represent Christ, right? And we will see that, remember how they were introduced just so casually? Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God. Well, nice of you to mention it, right? And they were given the 7 trumpets. This is where this appears. It goes right through to the end. So we never really get out of the throne room. Right? We're still there at the end.
Right.
And what are we doing in the throne room? Why are we there? Right? We see the Father's throne, light unapproachable. We see the Ark of the Covenant. Where are we? What do we mean by the throne room?
The Holy of Holies.
We're talking about the Holy of Holies, which is only open when?
Once a year, Day of Atonement.
Which is where in the yearly cycle?
It is at the end of the year, beginning of the year.
Right. The end is the beginning. The capstone is the Day of Atonement. The next thing they do is they celebrate the Feast of Booths, which is the Exodus.
Right.
We're starting over.
Right.
Okay. But if we're in the Day of Atonement, we are at the end. And this is the Day of Atonement all the way through. We're still there with these 7 angels. Right? Come, I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. Right, we see this before. One of the 7 angels that we were told stand before God, apparently all the time, the ones with the 7 trumpets and later the 7 bowls full of the wrath of God, has shown John something before, the judgment on the great whore. This is much nicer than the great whore. Note that New Jerusalem comes down from God from heaven. Who's in it? City that has all the righteous folks in it. So where have they been?
They've been in heaven.
They've been in heaven. There is not a 1,000-year reign of peace on earth with Jesus reigning over the nations. That's not what it all ended. Every time we see a second coming of Christ, and we see more than one in Revelation, what happens to the wicked?
They're destroyed.
They're destroyed.
There's no one left on earth.
And the righteous are caught up to Christ to be with the Lord they're caught up in the air to be with the Lord forever. And so we shall ever be with the Lord, the Paul said. There's not the slightest hint of the redeemed being on the ruined earth for the period of the millennium. Look, the earth has been called the pit, right? The big angel comes down with the chain and locks him in the pit, right? He's stuck here, looking at the results of his work, but there's nothing to do except wait for the judgment, right? All right. City appears to be somewhat transparent, repeatedly described in terms of precious jewels. And this is a repeat of something in the Old Testament. Oh, what a surprise that is, right? You can hardly deal with a verse in Revelation before you stumble over something that comes from the Old Testament or the intertestamental Jewish religious literature, right? And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. The entire following passage is referencing the great vision of the New Jerusalem in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 to 48. Without being aware of that passage, it will not be clear why many specifics in this section are stated in the way they are. Compare that verse above to this. In visions of God, he brought me to the land of Israel. Where was Ezekiel? He was in Babylon, right? So he goes there in a vision, and he set me down on a very high mountain. This phrase, great high mountain, and this phrase, very high mountain, are the same set of words, on which was a structure like a city to the south. So in both cases, they're standing on a great high mountain, and they see the city. All right, the magnificence of the New Jerusalem is emphasized. In Ezekiel, the most magnificent thing of all would have been the new temple, which never came to be. Well, the temple described in Ezekiel will never happen, but that doesn't mean another temple won't be built, right? In the temple in Ezekiel, the land rises. It becomes the highest mountain on earth. And there's a tableland where the holy significance spreads out to a certain 10,000 furlongs. That would have required a change in the physical structure of the country. That never happened. So you can rebuild a temple on Mount Zion. That will happen. Okay. After all, the Antichrist will come and sit where?
In the temple.
In the temple, showing himself as God. All right. So there will be an attempt to rebuild it. Had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. Those would be gatekeepers. That's the formal business of a city. And on the gates were the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel inscribed. These are the tribes as depicted in, what chapter is that? Chapter 7, Ray said. Is that correct? Is that right?
I don't think so.
I think it is.
It is?
That's
Okay.
where the where the 12 tribes are enumerated, where the sealing is going on.
Okay. I thought it was later.
Okay. On the east, 3 gates, north, south, west. Okay. All right. There's something wrong there, right? What do you see?
Order of the
The order is
The
wrong,
order's
yes.
wrong.
Okay.
Only starts with the east.
East,
should go
north,
clockwise.
south, west.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, this is not an enumeration as it should be. Should start with east and go around.
Yeah, east and go to the south.
South.
Next.
And then west and then north. All right.
So there has to be a reason for that.
Well, it could be a textual corruption.
There's a thought.
And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So what you have is, you have the name of the tribe that is the patriarch up above the gate, and on the foundation stones you have the patriarch named. It's not terribly important. This section is depicted wrongly in some way or another, without really understanding the war camp of Israel, to which the city has already been camped. The wicked go up over the broad earth to attack the camp of the saints. Okay? So the first way that the city is described is it's a renewal of the war camp. Why? Because the last war occurs there, the final judgment. Knowing about the war camp also means that we must also know about ancient maps, which direction is primary. We don't have any question about that. Which is the primary direction and why?
East, because that's the direction life comes from.
Rising of the sun.
The rising of the sun brings
Life.
life. The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings, the Bible says. Okay? So, they knew something about that. If you're sickly and weak and likely to die, if you got the COVID, what should you do?
Get yourself out in the sun. Get some sunlight on you.
That's exactly what the sanitariums of Dr. Kellogg did. That's what the military did, imitating Dr. Kellogg. And their results in the 1919 influenza were far better than the results of standard hospitals. Yeah. Get people out in the sun, especially if it's a virus, right?
Get some vitamin D.
Yeah. Yes. If we can't be in the sun, we can at least take the vitamin that is the chief. You know, we want vitamin D and we want zinc. We want nature's two big destroyers of viruses, right? And these things that they were touting that were found to be not good, well, they were good. If you get to a person soon enough and you give him hydroxychloroquine, it will have but it's got a zinc base. Of course it's going to work, right? But that's early in. If you have this person doing poorly and they're having an explosion, you've already gone too far with that person without doing the basics, right? You got to, as soon as you come down with it, this is what you need to do. All right, we're going to find out more about this business of disease right in this section. So we know in ancient maps, there have been a few ancient maps that have survived. And they face east. What's our primary direction?
North.
North, right? But north is the direction of warfare in the ancient world, right? Because here's the Fertile Crescent, and anybody who's coming from the north, that's bad news. Right? All right. So here, but we have to remember when we look at this, that this is the 12 tribes of the Exodus. This is not the 12 tribes of Revelation 7, right? But the big difference is, you've got that Levi, see the blue? That is counted as a regular tribe, right? So and plus, Dan is gone, right? So you replace that. Levi shows us that the New Testament is being looked at because Levi is no longer a priestly nation. Dan is Judas, and Dan, that is Judas, is the tribe that has been removed. Okay? And the foundations are at the gates, all right? What else does it say over here? Oh, this is also a supersized high priest pectoral. Now, in right-wing Protestants, you will hear it called the breastplate. Nobody's ever heard of a breastplate except right-wing Protestants. This is a pectoral, right? Worn over the chest, over the pectoral muscles, all right? It had a chain from the shoulders down to hold it. 12 tribes are not the same. Okay, we've got that. So, look at this. The war camp, the high priest's pectoral, and the New Jerusalem are all from the same symbol, right? They're all related. Oh yes. The nature of a foundation. In an ancient city, the wall was the key. Trenches of stone were laid, and stone built up several feet, about the height of a man, and then came mud brick. So when you go to an ancient city, you see lots of walls, stone walls, rising 3 or 4 feet. And that's it. Where's the rest of it?
Well, got washed away.
Or
Burned.
burned away. Yeah. Even strong walls had one danger area weakness, the city gates. That was the basic point of attack. Therefore, huge boulders were usually laid underneath the area that was going to be a gate so that it could not be undermined. In other words, each individual gate had its own foundation. 12 gates with 12 separate foundations under each one, but not under the whole wall. So dispense with the ribbons of color underneath a solid gold city. The gates are the entry point into the city, and in ancient Jerusalem they defined who and what would enter a particular gate. The Damascus gate. Well, if you're going to Damascus, this is the short route, right?
Uh-huh.
That's on the northeast. The sheep gate. Well, that's coming from Bethlehem, which is 5 miles south of us. So which side is that on? That's on the south. All right. Oh, look at this. The Solomonic gate at Hazor. All right. I've been shrewd. I've showed you the Solomonic gate at Gezer and the Solomonic gate at Megiddo, and now we're looking at the one in Hazor. And they're all exactly the same. There's the 2 big towers here, and there's 3 rooms on each side. It's a 6-chambered thing, and you go through the center, and you can see the smoother stones at the top, and underneath, of course, the bigger stones, so that you can't dig under that gate. All right. So what was the gate itself? Well, the gate itself was probably wood. Well, they didn't want firebrands to hit that thing, so as you saw at Gezer, they built more stuff around that even. So it wasn't easy to get in. We can skip that. That's just what isn't being described. Okay. All right. We have the symbolism. The one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and walls. Well, that's just like the measuring rod that the angel has in Ezekiel. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width. He measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. That's 1,400 miles or so. Its length and width and height are equal, telling us this is the Holy of Holies. He measured its wall, 144 cubits, over 200 feet wide, really wide wall. So you're not going to, but note the 12 by 12 dimensions, 144, okay? Right? It's 12 apostles and prophets this way, or patriarchs and prophets, 12 patriarchs and prophets all the way around, right? So you get this multiple of 12 squared. As soon as you add in height, you have a wall 1,400 miles high, which is fine in symbolism, not practical in this city. There's no temple in it because God is dwelling there. No surprise that the city is symbolized as itself being the equivalent of the Holy of Holies in the ancient sanctuary or temple, which was a perfect cube. In the temple, the temple sat on a slope. So the front had to be built up. That's why there was an undressed foundation stone that was to be put in front of the lintel, right? And this became a parable. All the stones were cut and marked in the Jordan Valley. And then they were brought up so that work didn't have to be done on the sacred mountain. But you know the story. What happened? When they got ready to build, the builders were confused because what?
They couldn't.
What's the first thing you need?
You need that big stone.
You need the stone that's going to start the bottom end here, at the bottom end of the slope, right? And they couldn't find one because it wasn't, the engineers did not feel that that much weight should be placed on a dressed stone, lest it crack. They wanted it wasn't going to be seen. It was going to have a beautiful foundation around it, but they wanted it to be natural. This became a parable of Christ. The stone which the builders rejected, has become the head cornerstone, right? Yeah. How many temples were there?
Well,
Sing out, anybody.
3, including the tabernacle, but just temples, just 2.
Okay. Now the tabernacle means tent,
Right.
right?
It was a tent. Yeah.
It was a tent, sort of, but it had solid walls, right? It was a movable sanctuary, right? And it was exactly 50% of the size of the temple,
Of Solomon's temple.
of Solomon's
Yeah.
temple. And then, of course, Solomon's temple had an anteroom added on top of it. But as far as the holy place and most holy place, this was double the size of the wilderness sanctuary. And then, of course, that was destroyed in August of 586 BC. Then, about 520, you have Zerubbabel and Joshua laying the foundation. But then, once the ruling area west of the river, the Persians had designated the Samaritans to do that. When they saw what was happening, they went right to the Persian court and said, "Don't do it. Don't do it." And this continued to be an argument all the way to 457. The reason that the Jews eventually won was both having to do with Persian law and personal relationships, right? That shows how important personal witnessing really is, right? Artaxerxes made, it's not 3 decrees. Cyrus made a decree, Darius confirmed it, and so did Artaxerxes, right? And the deal was, we have to do this. We inherited this. It was ordered but not done. But what's the principle of Persian law? The law of the Persians and Medes cannot be revoked. Okay? Even in Esther we find out, right? Once Haman got a decree that on such and such a day, anyone who wants to can kill the Jews and take their stuff, right? They couldn't revoke that. So what did Ahasuerus do? He made another decree. I command that Jews anywhere and everywhere should arm themselves and be prepared to fight for the death for their homes and their property. Well, that made it far less appealing, right? It was great when I was just going to go in and steal the stuff, right? And they couldn't fight back, right? But now that we're talking about armed people, maybe we should go down the street and break the glass windows of the store down the street that has good televisions, but nobody's in the store, and they don't have one of those chain things you pull down. That's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, this temple, now when it was built, there was great disappointment because this temple was never going to be the equivalent of the magnificent temple Solomon had built. He was the richest king of his day. He spared no expense. Well, these were people coming back from a displacement, from an exile, right? It just wasn't going to be that big a deal. You can rebuild it. Doesn't have to be that great. Sitting on the right site. God said he would always honor that place, right? But when the Hasmonean dynasty fell, the Maccabees. Maccabean War, 167 to 164. That's the 2nd century BC. Right? All right. And then they founded a dynasty. And the dynasty came to a miserable end. It was really awful. And the surviving ruler of the Second Triumvirate, Augustus, was looking around. There was an Edomite leader named Antipater. And Antipater ingratiated himself with the Romans. He always did what the Romans wanted to do. But he kept siding with the wrong guy. And as quickly as the third guy went, he went to Mark Antony. And as quickly as Mark Antony lost, he went to Octavian, right? And he made it clear to Octavian that he wanted to rule Judea, and he would always rule it in behalf of the Romans. Now this man, he inherited a lot of wealth from his manipulative father. The father was really good at ingratiating himself. And by the time Herod came to the throne, Antipater's son, there were actually two of them, but the other son got killed. And that meant that Herod inherited all of Antipater's stuff. And he actually was the richest man in the empire, by which I mean he was richer than his friend Augustus. He owned a lot of stuff. He had a lot of land. He was wealthy. He was hated because he was an Edomite. And if you know anything about the Old Testament, you know the Edomites sided with the Babylonians against Judah. And they were hated and cursed, and they're cursed to the prophets. And now, horror of horrors, the Jews had an Edomite as their king. Well, Herod was manipulative. He inherited that from his daddy. He knew how to do things. He asked the Romans to allow him to be styled Herod the Great, King of the Jews. Okay? That ended the Hasmonean dynasty, but it had an odd effect. When he started doing things as the king of the Jews, he, an Edomite, all kinds of Jews started thinking about the Messianic kingdom. And all those prophecies. Wasn't that supposed to happen around now? Right. And we've got this guy instead. So there was constant rebellion against Herod. I told you, one person who was an expert said that on average he had to kill one person every day for the entire length of his reign to stay on the throne. So he got the title of King of the Jews. That meant that it instigated messianic movements now. That isn't what he wanted. Okay? But he had one other enormous thing going for him. First of all, he realized that the area that was Galilee and Judea and Samaria, as it was called, the two former Hebrew kingdoms, didn't have a coastline. They had depended on the Phoenician cities, and now the Phoenician cities had been destroyed themselves. So he realized he needed a great port. So you know what he did? He built himself a great port. Enormous stones were, to build a sheltered harbor and to deepen it, and he named it Caesarea. What does that mean? the city of Caesar. He knew what he was doing. Right? And that became the Roman capital. He built this enormous city, which is still there, in the Roman style, in honor of Augustus, and also gave himself the great port that he needed. It's still there, all right? Why did he want a great port? Because he was going to be importing a lot of stuff. What did he have in mind? He figured there was something he could do that nobody had ever thought of or would ever dare to attempt. It was so complicated what he was thinking. He wanted to take that sad little temple of, well, started with Zerubbabel and Joshua, but Ezra and Nehemiah finished it, right? He wanted to take that not Solomonically magnificent temple apart. He wanted to dismantle it, right? And then he wanted to level the top of Mount Zion, and he wanted to build a big wall, about 15 stories high, around it. And he built some, it was pretty big. Some of those stones weigh 90 tons, and they're way up there. When we talk about the Wailing Wall, we're talking about a piece of that wall that's still left, right? And on top of this magnificent, elevated Mount Zion, he rebuilt the temple. But it wasn't just any temple, right? Where did he get the marble from?
Italy.
Yeah, all that white Korea marble from Italy. Well, of course, that's a big deal. But it was a gift. Right?
Still got to transport it.
Yeah, it was a gift. It was a gift from Augustus. The gates in Arcana, copper gates, 90 tons each. Right? Everything to measure of human perfection, right? 18,000 people working on it, year after year, right? Right? And was never finished, right? Jesus said, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. And they said, you're not even 50 years old. We've been building this temple for this many decades. It's not done. You're going to destroy it and build it in 3 days? Yes. Okay. All right, so in the end, you had this magnificent temple. And the Romans really worried about it. They not only put everything that they could into it, it was a great thing for the Roman Empire. Why? Well, because Jews only had one temple. How many temples are there to Diana? Oh, they're scattered all over the place. They might be beautiful, but they're not big. Right? They might be bringing in money, but not like this. Why? This deal is that everybody has to come at least once in their lifetime and offer a sacrificial offering, a whole burnt offering for their sins. Now, there are Jews all the way from West Africa to China. Right?
So they came from all over the world bringing gifts and offerings.
You might have spent 50 years collecting the money that you needed for one sin offering, right? Right? So Jerusalem was becoming covered with gold. Why? Because this was a big deal, right? That's the background to Jesus driving out the money changers. All right. So this second temple really had 2 phases, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was the Ezra Nehemiah completed temple, and then there was Herod's temple, to which there was no equal. And probably in magnificence, it was as great as Solomon's, or maybe even greater. Right? And now the point is being made here that in the new holy Jerusalem, no temple. Something even greater. There's something especially great about this city. Okay. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and its walls, and he measured the city with his rod. Remember, this whole section is related to the earlier vision of the New Jerusalem, which was available to the restored Israel and Judah, both because they both were restored from exile. That's what Ezekiel's talking about. This modern state of Israel is not the renewal of the ancient kingdoms of Judah and Israel, right? A vision that was never fulfilled. You'd have to have the whole physical topography of Palestine changed for that temple to have come true. In the section in Ezekiel 40 to 48 we find, he brought me there. Behold, there was a man whose appearance was like bronze with a linen cord and a measuring rod or reed in his hand. So, oh yeah, both the original and now this city are being measured. The measuring emphasizes the magnificence of the two New Jerusalem visions. Okay? I asked this question, and you must think thematically. Would the first hearers of Revelation be impressed? Yes. And then I asked this question. After all, where did they live? I had to keep asking and asking. We're talking about the magnificence of the New Jerusalem. Where did they live? They lived in the richest, that's the answer. Not Turkey, not Asia. Okay. Yes, they lived in the richest cities. And yet those richest cities in the empire were as nothing compared to this, right? We have to think about, as always, right? We think about, who was this written to, right?
Roman Asians.
You know, okay, so you Laodiceans may be living in the single richest city in the empire. But compared to this, right?
It's a hovel.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you've seen this before. It's just a paper box. At least he's got it gold, right? He's trying to give us a good picture. It is a good picture. All right, but probably this person, like most interpreters, has a literal interpretation in mind, right? And why is that? Because they don't know it's the Holy of Holies. Why? Because they're right-wing Protestants who are weak in what?
Old Testament.
Weak in the Old Testament. See? All right. So we don't, yes, it's not going to rise up. Of course, as I said before, this isn't a fair comparison anyway. We're talking about a new Earth that is the capital of the universe. There's some really big planets. Even in our solar system, there's some really big planets. Well, what would the planet be like that, right? You want to, God himself dwells there. You've got all these other things that's just the throne room, right? That's just the throne room there, right? Well, all right. So I get it. The new Earth would obviously be the largest planet in the universe and also its most beautiful. The city will be enormous as well, but not a cube. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. Now, of course, we understand you're going to expect that we're going to have a jewel for a tribe or apostle, a patriarch or apostle, right? So with these 12 gates, what are we going to have?
12.
We're going to have this foundation, but the foundation is going to be one of these precious or semi-precious stones, right? They weren't semi-precious in the ancient world. They were all precious stones. That's why they're here, all right? And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, all right? And you have to think again about, where do you have to go to get all these stones? You have to go all over the world to get all these stones, right? And under the ocean to get the pearls, right? You could come up with a big pearl. Do you know how those pearls were gotten? Boys, yes, boys were trained to hold their breath and go down and get the pearls, harvest the pearls, and come back.
And some still do that.
Yeah. The re-mention of the wall reminds us that the 12 gates have a dual function. The littles are carved with the names of the 12 patriarchs, or tribes, while the foundation stones are carved with the names of the 12 apostles. Both Israels, Old and New, have a gate specifically for their individual characteristics. That is, each gate has an apostle matched to a patriarch or tribe. Peter and Judah, because Peter was the leader of the apostles and Judah was the leader of the patriarchs. Okay. And of course, an angelic gatekeeper. The first gate jewel was jasper, the second sapphire, and so forth. So here we have a city where the 12 jewels are the same as the 12 jewels on the high priest's breastplate. I'm writing to. I can say pectoral all I want. And while the Egyptologists will relate to that, what? Everybody else will say breastplate. You remember that the breastplate was a hollow square, a miniature of the war camp of Israel. In keeping with many of the jeweled pectorals of the 18th dynasty Egypt, why are we picking on the 18th dynasty? Well, for two reasons. It was the great golden age of ancient Egypt, right? And it was the moment of the Exodus, right? God picked on Egypt when it was at its peak, when he caused it to peak, right? He was ready. All right, 18th dynasty Egypt, from which Israel had just escaped, a square pectoral with jewels along the sides, which was a basic type worn by the Egyptian priests. The big difference was that the Egyptian pectorals had the various gods of Egypt in the center. But of course the high priest pectoral was hollow in the center, for that was where God dwelt, the center where the sanctuary stood, and no thing could ever properly represent the God of Israel, as the second commandment makes clear. There's a great line from one of the Dothan couple, the two of them, married couple, excavated a lot of Philistia. Both dead now, but some decades ago. Comment made there, dug up in some Philistine writing, complained that the Hebrews are atheists. They worship nothing. Well, that's literally true. You obviously don't understand it, but that's literally true. They what? They worship no thing. Right? Okay. The breastplate, or more correctly the pectoral, worn by Israel's high priest, had a hollow center instead of the God's image. Here we've got the two images of Upper and Lower Egypt side by side. These pectorals were miniature temples. You see the roof along the top? It is a temple. Okay, so once again, the holy city is a temple. All of these things are working together. Yeah, thus it was pictured that high priest of Israel bore Israel on his heart. Right? That's an image of Christ, right? Mm-hmm. The high priest pectoral was a mini war camp, and the New Jerusalem is the camp of the saints, 29, grown huge. In the following verses it is made clear that the city is itself the Holy of Holies, since God dwells there. I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light. Its lamp is the Lamb. Okay. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory, and the honor of the nations into it. These are the redeemed, right? These are redeemed from every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, right? Sameness or difference? What does the human mind go toward?
Sameness.
Okay. But now when you look out at the universe, or maybe just an acre of the desert just after it's rained. You know what happens?
Blossoms. Your flowers come up.
A gazillion different kinds of flowers, right? God does not have any problem with difference, right? All the different stuff of the universe. Well, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Because he's the creator. Because our creative minds are a reflection of his creative mind, right? Will all the people in the kingdom of God be just alike?
No.
They all look alike in Harry Anderson paintings, right? There weren't even any black folks there. All right. But the point is that this is a picture of variety, right? People can still enjoy being around folks just like them.
Or others not like them.
Or equally. That's what's different. Not that there's individual nations, but what? But they'll all come together. Its gates will never be shut by day. That's because it's never going to be attacked. And there will be no night there, right? What did you do at night? You closed the gates for protection. 2 men came to Sodom, right? They had no place to sleep, so they were going to sleep in the open square because the gates would be closed. They were safe. Of course, these were the guardian deities of the 2 cities, right? Who had complained, this was interesting, complained that they could not govern Sodom and Gomorrah. They were ungovernable. And God, this is very early in human history. People are still learning lessons about how God does things. God said what?
Want me to go see?
Oh, go down, see, take a look at
And
what
I
you
will
have
know.
to say. Yeah, I'll know what I'm seeing, right? And on the way, we have to stop by Abraham, who's called the friend of God, because I'm not going to do this without telling Abraham. Why? Because his kin is down there. Let's see what this is deliberately placing Abraham in the space where he works it down. So he's got, I won't destroy the city if there's this number of people in it who are righteous. He works it down to below the level of Lot's family, thinking, oh, well, they'll be safe then. But he didn't know how corrupt they had become. Its gates will never be shut by day, and there'll be no night there. But nothing unclean will ever enter it. Where am I getting this unclean from? From Leviticus. Well, in Numbers, which is another Levitical book. And so, anyone who practices abomination and lying, right? But only those who are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Abomination is parallel to unclean, right? That's and lying. Well, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, right? I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb. The point is explicitly made because it is in such strong contrast to the New Jerusalem of Ezekiel 40 to 48. That's their Bible. That's what they were expecting, right? There, the central point of the new city is the holiness as expressed in the magnificent new temple that would stand far above and beyond anything imagined in Solomon's temple. But in the unimaginable New Jerusalem in Revelation, even the magnificence of the temple of Ezekiel's prophecy of what might have been becomes utterly irrelevant. A new cosmos, a new earth, capital of the universe, the city of God. There Father, Son, Spirit dwell, their life permeating out from the most holy place across the vast universe forever. Tell you a story. I've told you this story before. After the second coming of Christ, all these millions upon millions of the redeemed go to heaven. And of course, that could be done like that. right?
Uh-huh.
You're here and an instant later you're there. That's not the way God does things, right? Sometimes it looks like he's taking the most roundabout method, right? But everything with God is relationship. Everything is relationship, right? He could have preached the gospel to the world just by announcing it to the whole world, right? Would have been far more instant and effective. Would also have removed any freedom of choice and undermined the whole point. All right. But here they are. And then with these waves of ecstasies sweeping over the millions of the redeemed. Okay. Everybody's already happy, but this is beyond happy. This is like flying apart. I'm so excited and overjoyed, right? Okay. So what does every person in that vast host have with them?
An angel.
An angel.
Their guardian angel.
Guardian angel. There's nothing you can't talk to about this person because he was there from the moment you were conceived until after you died, right? All right.
And he knows your thoughts.
Yeah, knows your thoughts because
they wrote it down.
they read, they speak, they sing, they love to speak, they love to sing, but they don't need to. Right? They communicate telepathically. What's happening to us? Why is this happening? Oh, because you look over there, about 2 o'clock, down a little bit. What do you see? Well, I see a massive discs. You saw this in your life. You know what it is? Yes. It's a bunch of galaxies. Right? Galaxy is a big deal. Right? Even the Star Trekkies didn't get to go outside the galaxy. Right? Just exploring the galaxy was a big enough deal for Gene Roddenberry and his friends. All right. Well, what is that? Well, they wanted to congratulate you. You won. They wanted to be the first, so they asked and they stepped forward. Well, my reaction was, I don't know anything about galaxies moving around, right? No, that's not our universe. What do you mean they just asked if they could step forward? Well, that's what you were asking about. That's what it is. Okay? It is what it is, but it dawns on you. Wow. What we know about existence and reality is, right?
Nothing.
It's almost,
It's nothing.
yeah, it's nothing. For instance, we know, and every scientist who deals with this will tell you, there's dark matter and there's dark energy. If dark energy survives, it takes precedence, the universe will continue to expand forever. If dark matter takes precedence, the universe will collapse in on itself and be back to the head of the pin again. Okay. We can't really say for sure because we can only see a little bit of the universe. And the part that we can see, we know because there's absolute proof that the computations don't lie. We can even see how it works and we can understand it, but there's not a hint of what's there. We know it's there, we can't see it. Neither dark energy nor dark matter. 96% approximately of the universe is not touchable by the human race.
And it's not observable.
It's not observable. The most we can do is observe on the basis of
Effects.
Mathematical theory.
mathematical computations. Say, this is what it's doing. We understand that. Okay.
We don't know why.
Yeah. All right. So you're telling me something I don't know. How could a vast collection of galaxies step forward, right? Other things. What are we? Well, this is Jacob's ladder. After sin in this little planet in an out-of-way place, this became a main highway in the universe. Interesting. That's talking to me in my language, right? I can understand the main highway. I can even understand Jacob's ladder. Right? Okay. Another comment. Give you another example. This is one of the inner corridors of the universe. I understood what a corridor is. That's about it. But I'll take your word for it. Then I notice he stopped talking. He's letting me think. But he's not looking at me. You know where he's looking?
He's looking at the galaxies.
Yeah. And I say to him, "Are you talking to them?" He says, "We all are." And by "we all are," I know we're talking about the millions of angels, billions of angels in this crowd. Right? Oh, you'll get to know them all. Ha! Right? We're talking about billions of beings, right? You'll get to know them all. Well, I don't know. That sounds more daunting to me than even a redeemed human being could ever accomplish. But he finished the conversation. He let me stew for a while, and then he said, "You have eternity." Well, that's kind of a conversation to end here, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have eternity. Okay. And the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Well, that's the main thoroughfare. In Roman cities, there were two roads, a main one north-south road and a main east-west road, each with their Latin name. Okay? And they had water courses. Right? This is like that. Okay? In Eden, a river appeared, doubtless from a spring that divided into 4 rivers as it flowed out of Eden. Now this is interesting. All 4 of those rivers are still there. I mean still there on earth. Despite the claim that Noah's flood was a total remake of the earth, which it wasn't. What we see in the earth is what's happened to it over 4.5 billion years, not what happened to it on Noah's flood. One of the names of the 4 was Gihon, which means gusher, which certainly describes a spring, but not a river. There is something directly related. On Mount Zion, Solomon completed the temple where God dwelt. Under Mount Zion, there was a spring, which is also still there and still goes off. And it was named Gihon, after the spring in Eden. Right? And so when you're walking through Hezekiah's tunnel and your feet and ankles are cold, that's the spring water springing up. Its proximity underneath the sacred mountain made perfect sense in naming it after the spring in Eden. Not surprisingly, the symbols from Eden complete the great cycle from creation to recreation in the Bible. Okay? The Holy Spirit oversaw the making of the Bible, and it's a big cycle. We start with creation, we end with another creation. The river of water of life, crystal clear, flows from the throne. So if you drink from it, what does it give you?
Life.
Life. Also on one side and the other of the river was the tree of life. Well, we probably got a little confusion here, with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. I understand that you are playing off of the tree of life that was in Eden. On one side and the other of the river is a little confusing. Now the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. We've got to do a little explaining here. The word tree is actually the word that means wood. Okay? We hear that Christ was hanged on a tree. Well, not exactly. That's because that word is often means tree. But it was a wooden cross. It's derived meaning. Since wood can refer to either a single thing or a lot of things, And since the text seems to indicate a tree of life or trees of life on either side of the river, that is probably the occasion for the number confusion in the text. These trees, I think they are trees, are super alive, yielding a different kind of fruit every month. That would make it fun for people today who, grow stuff. What are we doing this month? Oranges. What are we doing next month? Cherries. What are we doing next month? Figs. And notice the leaves singled out. As ancient herbal medicine would tell us, often leaves are more medicinal than fruit, such as olive trees. Right? There are some trees where you say, the fruit is good, the leaves are better. For what? If you're sick, this is what you need to eat. If you're sick, this is what you need as a poultice. Right? Okay. So what we have here in this statement, the leaves of the tree revealing of the nations, is very interesting. It was that kind of use of leaves that the first hearers of Revelation would recognize. See, we often skip over these things because we don't think about them. Who do we have to constantly keep in mind? Some people we haven't met yet, right? Right? We have to call them people we haven't met yet. But what? If we don't screw up, what?
We will.
Yeah. These leaves are a poultice for the sick is not implied, since elsewhere we've been told that no uncleanness is going to be present. Right? So that was the basic thing that was laid out. Right?
You won't need a poultice.
Remember that we know from Leviticus that unclean and contagious and sick are all the same thing. The verb therapeuo, this is a verb we saw just today, Ray. The verb therapeuo, you recognize that word. Medical service implies that the leaves themselves perform the function of doctors. That is, they are ideally suited to keep people alive and in perfect health.
All those MDs will be out of business.
That's true. They'll have to do what so many of the doctors that I know do. They'll just have to tend their garden.
There you go.
Right? It would, of course, be ideal if the immense population of this immense city had access to multiple trees of life along the river of life that flowed down the main concourse of the city. Remember that was the function of the tree of life in Eden. Now, the tree of life in Eden was keeping Adam and Eve alive. It wasn't a symbol. Right? Well, it was a symbol, right? But it was a literal.
It was both.
Yeah. If you do what God says and eat only this, how long will you live?
Forever.
Forever. You have eternity. So much so that the cherubim were dispatched to make it impossible for sinful mankind to gain access to the tree and the enduring life it imparted. Right? It says explicitly in Genesis that the cherubim were put there to guard the road to the tree of life. Right? It's saying literally if they could have gotten to it, all sorts of stuff that works fine when you're 20 stops working. Oh, that's a rip. I needed that stuff. Why? Because God did not want immortal sinners. Right? He had made physical arrangements to keep people alive forever, but he didn't want them to have access to that after the rebellion. And, by the way, there was another tree. There was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's not mentioned. Why?
Don't need it.
Don't need it. Everybody has that knowledge by experience, right? How do you know in the Bible? You don't know unless you experience it. Right? No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his slaves will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. Now, this is a big deal here. All right, this is a big deal. Let me repeat a note about slaves in Revelation. It happens that Paul repeatedly introduces himself as a slave of Jesus Christ, right alongside his apostleship. But Paul wasn't a slave and could not be. Why? He was a Roman citizen. It would be impossible for anyone to enslave Paul. But he considers slave of Christ as an honorable title. He doesn't mention being a Roman citizen. You don't hear that in every epistle. Right? So he tells Titus, he tells the Romans, he's a slave of Christ. Paul introduces his associates as slaves of Christ. For instance, Phoebe, the very woman who brought the epistle of Romans to the Romans, is called at the end of Romans a slave of Christ. Epaphras, Colossians 1:7, this was the guy who had to go over there and deal with the Colossian heresy. Remember that? The slave of Christ, 1:7, 4:7, 4:12. James, the legal brother of Christ, older brother of Christ, stepbrother of Christ, calls himself a slave to God and to the Lord Jesus Christ. Think of that. This man had to say about his own earthly brother, right? These guys had a long way to go. They didn't have to go as far as Mary, but they had a long way to go, right? Right? Yeah, he was different. Now we know why he was different. He was God. That's so unfair. Right? It's just ridiculously unfair.
Especially have to say that to a younger brother.
To a younger brother. Right? It says explicitly that after the resurrection, Jesus had an interview with James. Yeah, I can imagine. All right. Simeon Peter himself calls himself a slave and apostle of Jesus Christ. He may be an apostle, but he's still a slave. Right? Jude introduces himself as a slave of Jesus Christ and the brother of James. At the time of Revelation, it was a title both traditional and honorable. All right, his slaves will worship him. But I'm more interested in this other statement. What am I really interested in here? Take a look at the verse, it's short. What's really different here? Is there a Bueller out there who has figured it out in YouTube land? Okay, let's take a look. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. No man has seen God at any time, John 1:18, 1 John 4:12. Revelation's comment is significant, for it marks a complete change from all prior reality. Note Paul's comment to Titus and its implications. I charge you, in the presence of God, who gives life to all things, he who is the blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who alone has immortality, who dwells in unapproachable light, whom no one has ever seen or can see. To him be honor and eternal dominion. Amen. Wow. Right? You will remember that when Moses asked to see God openly, he was refused. For a man cannot see me and live. Prior to eternity, God has dwelt in light unapproachable, which a priest would have destroyed any created being. But now, in this new situation, God has communicated his eternal life and being to the saved, who can see his face openly. Real conversation can be had with the creator of the universe.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Oh. That's what it says. Right? and night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign into the eternity of eternities. And he said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. These words were much more significant than they would be in the modern Western world. In parts of the world, they would still have the intended impact. My house is never truly in dark. No. It has certain low lights that remain on all night, and some exterior lights that are also on all night, and a utility supplied outside a light pole. And the light of the surrounding city is such that only a few prominent constellations appear. The dome of the heavens, so very powerful in sparsely inhabited South Jordan, showed me just how powerful the night, as distinguished from the day, really is. Even the artificial light of the cities the hearers of Revelation lived in was a dim and smoky and very different from the light that we are exposed to. He said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. And the Lord, the Master, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show his servants what must soon take place. And behold, I am coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps or guards or pays close attention to the words of the prophecy of this book. This points us back to the opening of the book. The book is passed from father to son to his angel to John. The angel is not mentioned there, but he is the speaker here. The constant theme is that Revelation is especially about the time of Christ's coming, that is, the cycle of the assemblies and its parallel cycle in our age. The ones who keep guard or pay attention to the words of prophecy in this book are described in exactly the same words of those who keep guard or pay close attention to the commandments of God in Revelation 14:12, the last word of the third angel of that chapter. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep or guard or pay close attention to the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. There's an obvious relationship. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said, you must not do that. I am a fellow slave with you and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep or guard or pay close attention to the words of this book. Worship God. The point is also stated in the prologue. John's relief and excitement at what the angel has shown him leads to his ardent expression of thanks. He falls down because he is going to prostrate himself, which is what proskuneo means, forehead to the ground, the apparent form of worship at that time, but appropriate, rather, form of worship. But he has been admonished on this point before and told again that only the direct object of worship, even just expressing thanks, is to be directed to God. And keeping, guarding, and paying close attention to the words of this book is exactly what we've been doing. He said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Let the evildoer still do evil, and the filthy still be filthy, and the righteous still do right, and the holy still be holy. As you can tell, we're in the final comments. The words of this book of prophecy contain the fate of every man. In contrast to the book of Daniel, which was to be sealed up until the time of the end, the Revelation cannot be sealed up because it is already a prophecy about the time of the end, which time is already at hand. Thus, Revelation again references Daniel, but clearly supersedes it. And again, we have another implication of the close of human probation, from which no final decision will ever be changed. Let what each person decides remain for eternity. Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Even in final parting words, Revelation again says that the way to judge faith, motivation, deepest beliefs is to look at what an individual does. Coupled with that is the repeated statement that Jesus Christ is himself the entirety of this story. He is the beginning and the ending, using the Greek alphabet again for a third time. This phrase is called a merism. Now, this is important to understand. It wouldn't be good to say I'm the first and the last, because guess what you'd be missing? You may be missing everything in between. But that's not what Amerism is. Knowing good and evil, well, what about all the gray areas? There's a lot of gray areas in there. When Satan promised Eve that she would know good and evil, that in Hebrew is a merism, meaning you'll know everything from good to evil and all the stuff in between. And you'll know it how? By experience. Okay. But from the first to the last really means first encompassing everything in between to the last. When Satan lied to Mother Eve that she would know good and evil, his lie turned out to be true. It actually means that humans know everything, from good to evil, and all the gray areas in between, which is the primary reason that sin will not and cannot rise again. Sin won't rise again because God says don't do it, right? God will never have to say don't do it. Why? Well,
Not just us, everyone will
everyone,
know what
that's
the end
right.
result is if this ever is allowed to rise again. And they don't want that result.
Yeah, from the most distant planet, everybody is experiencing something. It's like they're living right here. They can hardly stand it, but they can't turn away, right? You
Right.
just don't turn away when the plane is about to crash. Right? It's just gonna hold you, and that's what it is. God no longer has to tell them, look carefully, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is important to understand. Amerism is a really important thing to understand. All right. And so everybody, as you said, everybody will be fully self-aware because they've experienced it and would not think of ever being interested in that again. Blessed are those who wash their robes in order that they may have right or authorization or power to the tree of life. See what I tell you? They weren't authorized to have access to the tree of life, right? The cherubim were there with their glittering swords. And that they may enter the city by gates. Now you have authorization to the tree of life. You've done it. Outside of the dogs and sorcerers, and the sexually immoral, and the murderers and idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices a lie or deception. Notice that last part doesn't seem to fit with the rest of it, but I understand. The big thing about Revelation is it's a time of deception, deceit, right? Most people you meet are going to be Satan, they're going to lie to you, right? These are people who are distinct because in their mouth was found no lie, right? These sections keep ending with the contrast between the saved and the lost, the right doers, and the catalog of evils that immediately follows. Having right to the tree of life is yet another reference to Eden, closing the circuit between the creation and recreation. And dog doesn't imply sexual activity, since all pornographic sexual activity is covered in practicing porneo. That's a whole category, referencing rather the wolf pack role of dogs as the street cleaners in ancient cities. Don't pick up that dead bird. Why? You might get your hand bitten off. There's a dog who's already going to take care of that. That's not your business, right? Or any of the other trash. Ancient cities generated trash just like our cities do, right? That's what we had dogs for. Right? And you remember how this worked out unfortunately for Queen Jezebel, right?
Was much left to her?
Yeah. Well, all that there was no nutrition or fun in eating a ham, right? Right?
A lot of bones.
Yeah. A lot of bones and not a lot of meat.
Right.
The dog isn't stupid. There's not enough reward there for me to bother eating that. You people clean that up yourselves. All right. So that's what's referenced here. This is not a city that needs the dogs to keep it clean. Lying is countenanced in paganism. Even the gods are liars. Which the Proverbs says that lying lips are an abomination. Somebody wrote to me and asked me, you say abomination only refers to pagan practices. But 20 times in the book of Proverbs, things are said to be abominations that aren't some kind of sexual practice. Yeah, but they are paganism. That's the point. Abomination, toiva means something detested. Okay. And yes, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Yes, got it. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the assemblies. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright and morning star. Jesus confounded the Pharisees one day. The Lord said to my Lord, who's he talking to? He's talking to the Messiah. We all agree on that. Then why does David call him my Lord? He's the descendant of David. How could he be David's Lord if he's the descendant of David? There's only one answer to that question. He could only be the Lord of David if he preceded David. But wait a minute. The Messiah is the son of David. Which is true.
Yes.
That's what they didn't get. Jesus said, okay, I'm going to ask you a question about the Messiah. You're so hell-bent to make sure that people understand that I'm not the Messiah. Let me just ask you a question. How did they answer him? What did they say?
They didn't.
They didn't. They had nothing to say. Right? And we find a point in the Gospels where a decision is made. Nobody asked him any more questions.
Yeah, they stopped challenging him
Yeah.
because they knew before they did that they were going to get slapped.
Yeah, right. And that doesn't mean that the apostles or little children or whoever could ask Jesus a question. There are questions and then there are questions, right? There are questions where I want to know, and there are questions where I'm objecting.
Expressing doubt.
If you are arguing with me, then don't argue, because this is a point so important, I'm not going to allow you to do that. Right? So eventually, even they learned their lesson. Oh, we can't challenge him, especially in public. All right, so the root of David is a mixture of titles in the Old Testament. We actually have the root of Jesse in 11:10. It doesn't say the root of David. Of course, he's also the promised son in 2 Samuel 7:12-16, where the son of David is who's promised. Here he also claims the title of the morning star, Venus, which Peter already had used for Christ, 2 Peter 1:19. Another reference to the morning star is in the message to Thyatira, where the overcomer is promised to receive the morning star. It is of interest that the fallen star in Isaiah 14 is an allusion to Satan, which was Venus. So my angel in Daniel would be Gabriel. What does Gabriel mean?
God's mighty warrior.
Well, a Gabor is a mighty man. Pick troops. The tribes had militias, right?
Uh-huh.
But they could not challenge the king. You see, David was a vassal to the Philistines until he wasn't, right? The Philistine Pentapolis, the 5 Philistine cities, woke up one day and realized, hey, our vassal king has united all the Hebrews. We better go up there and take care of him. They went up there and they got beaten. And what did that make them?
Vassals.
that made them vassals to David. And David said, okay, here's the deal. Some of you guys are giants. You're really, you're really the best warriors, but you're never going to beat us because our God will never allow it. But if you'll agree to accept our God as authority, I would like you to be my personal army, my picked men. They're called the picked men, the mighty men, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. These all look like football linebackers, and they were very good at what they did. They were fast and powerful, and nobody would challenge them. Right? David was never afraid that the Pharaoh of Egypt was going to invade. Right? He picked out one of the Pharaoh's daughters for his son, right? Told the Pharaoh, that's what I want, right? He wasn't worried about that. And the Philistine cities were not afraid that the Hebrews would attack them in the back or that the Egyptians would attack them in the front. Why?
The Egyptians were afraid of David too.
The Egyptians were afraid of David, and David as the overlord was not going to attack them. He was going to make sure that whatever they needed to make things successful, they would have it, right? Okay, so the mighty men that David had were these picked troops, right? And here we have Gabor El. The I is an of. That literally reads, the mighty man or mighty warrior of El. All right. So we would take it that he's one of the chief angels. All right.
Uh-huh.
The Spirit and the bride say, come. And let the one who hears say, come. And let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who desires take the waters of life without price. Okay. There were a lot of places in the ancient world where water was something you paid for, especially good water. An invitation to response makes perfect sense at the end of a book that contains a life or death message. John's postscript. I warn everyone who hears the words of this prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God will take away his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. There are hosts of ways adding to what the book really says or taking away what it says to be accomplished. The most direct way is to promulgate deceptions of Satan in regard to the message, which a host of false prophets and Protestantism is already doing. And that process will continue right to the point where the great false prophet, the man of sin, controls the world and enforces the mark of the imperial beast on pain of death. That's the contemporary challenge of Revelation. He who testifies to these things says, surely I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. And of course, we had a whole study on the epistolary beginnings. And here's an ending. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with all the saints. Amen. Remember that? Grace and peace to you, right? Mm-hmm. This reminds us that Revelation was first a letter, probably in codex form, sent to the 7 assemblies. This is similar to the situation of Hebrews, where the matter is so extensive and so complex that the reader can easily forget that the material was communicated as a letter. Oh, are you ready? I think we have time to get through this. All right. Who is the Lord Jesus speaking to? Why is where he's standing so significant here? Just put 33 by that. That's the number of the slide. That's the question on 33. All right, let's go to this. Oh, this is fun. 34 is this. Where is this? How is it related to the book of Revelation? There are two primary explanations of the symbol behind this. Give one of the two. Huh? We're only on the second slide. I hope you're not lost already. Oh, this was an easy one. Who is this person? How's he related to the book of Revelation? What is his symbol? Where? What chapter is the reference to him found? Give me the symbol and tell me where that's found in Revelation. That was an easy one. If you're lost, oh dear. 36. This looks like it has 4 questions. 36, the first question. What chapter is the sealing of Israel described? That came up today. Second question. What chapter is the millennium described? Third question. In what chapter is the message to Philadelphia found? The fourth is easy because we just covered it. What other section or sections in the Bible do we relate the New Jerusalem to? And there's more than one place, but I only asked for one. This is Ray's question. In what he's had advanced knowledge of these questions, so he's probably going to get this right because he's been cheating. In what chapters do we find the New Covenant promises? There are, think of 2 in the Old Testament, though you should be able to come up with all 3, and at least 1 in the New Testament. Are you bright enough to come up with all 4 chapters? Second question, in what chapter do we find the Son of Man receiving the kingdom from the Ancient of Days? That's also easy. Third question, in what chapter or chapters do we find the end of the age and the end of Jerusalem related? All right, this is another simple one. I keep throwing in these easy ones. What's wrong in the pictures to the top left and middle? How is the picture to the top right related? And somebody wrote too easy, and I agree with that person. Okay, next is number 39. What are these Roman soldiers doing? What symbol in Revelation does this relate to, and what does it prove? Oh, here's the catch. What chapter is the symbol for this explanation found? Oh, this is fun. There are 5 symbols in this painting. List all 5 of them. Go from the bottom to the top. And what chapter are we in? Okay, that was easy too. They're all right there in front of you. Oh, what is this? Well, it's the war camp of Israel because it says so right on there, right? So, name 3 separate things in the book of Revelation that this explains with the chapters. There's so many chapters in Revelation you could choose from. This is too easy. That's number 41. Oh, this one. What makes this coin significant? What symbol does it explain, and what chapter is that symbol in it? Who's on the coin? Shouldn't be very hard because the name is printed right there. And where does it come from? It says the place of its origin on the right-hand side. Okay, that's 42. 43, where is this from? What does it show as the correct interpretation of something from its time? Okay, 44. What is this thing? What symbol does it correctly interpret? And what chapter would that symbol be in? That was easy? No, it says this is a hard one only for A students. You wouldn't argue with the teacher, would you? Okay, 45. There are at least 2 things wrong with this picture. There's more than 2 things wrong with it. State at least 2 things. 46. Why is this slide of the northeast of the United States included? What passage would it illustrate and what chapter is that in? 47. Who are these people? Who ran afoul of them? Name at least 2. What does this have to do with Revelation? 48, this is a fun one. What's going on here? If you get it right, you can see how each of us are related to this. And of course, What chapter is this in? 49. What's this monument? Where is it? What's it a monument to? What does it have that's significant to our purposes? Where in Revelation would that apply? 50 says, the church in this photo is the city of Rome's official cathedral, where the Bishop of Rome presides. Behind it is the Lateran Palace. Right. What's so significant about that palace? That's not the original palace. It's one that was a rebuilding from the Middle Ages. Oh, here we go. Here's a map of the 7 cities to whom the book of Revelation was sent. This one is so easy, I'm embarrassed. What is the modern name of the territory where all these cities' ruins still exist? Okay, Ray, I'm sure you smiled when you saw this. As you can see from the picture, this woman has super blasters as she takes off for somewhere. Who is she? Where is she going? Why? And what chapter? Huh. What's going on in this picture? Who is the figure with the sword striking the red dragon? Where is this scene described? Okay, next week we'll do another one. You want to go back? All right. Who is he speaking to?
Church of Laodicea.
That's true. Why is where he's standing significant?
He's on the outside trying to get in. Doors closed.
Yeah.
That I think is one of the saddest pictures that I've ever seen.
Well, if you don't know what it's about, you might miss it, and it might seem like, oh, isn't that sweet? Did anybody get what this is?
Carmel Ridge.
It is the Carmel Ridge. At the end point, it goes southeast to northwest. At the northwest point, where it's looking out over the Mediterranean Sea. So, this is about where Elijah, yeah, because he told the servant to go down to the end and look. And the servant said he saw black clouds heading this way. And then there was a terrible thunderstorm. So this end, but this runs southeast another 20 miles, you come to the city of Megiddo. So the hill of Megiddo might be the Carmel Ridge, which should be okay because then the symbol would be the showdown with Elijah and the prophets of Baal.
Yeah.
That would be what symbol. The other is that no, that's not true at all. It's Har Megiddon, and it's the Mount of the Assembly, and that's the cosmic mountain. Okay. Who is this?
Nero.
Nero, yes. Ah, ugly puss, huh?
Chubby guy.
What chapter is the, well, what's the symbol? 666. As spelled in Greek, right? As spelled in
Yes.
Greek, because you need that in. And what chapter is that found?
13.
Okay. Where's the sealing? Is it still in Revelation 7? The millennium?
20.
Were you thinking 19, Ray? What chapter is the message of Philadelphia found? I can tell you this easily. 4 and 5 are the great throne room where the Lamb appears, right? That's where we first see that. This is the 6th church. It's just before that. So what chapter does it have to be? 3. What other sections relate the New Jerusalem to? Yeah, Ezekiel 40 to 48. What else? Is it anything like the war camp?
Camp of Israel.
Where's that found?
That be Numbers, but I don't remember the chapter.
Well, then you have failed this quiz.
Yes, I have.
with open book opportunities. So, what other section or sections in the Bible do we relate to New Jerusalem to? Well, I would, of course, do Ezekiel 40 to 48, but I would also think of the war camp of Israel in Numbers 1 to 3, right? Start with that. And I'd also add in the high priest's pectoral from the book of Exodus.
Of course.
Of course you would.
Yeah.
Oh, Ray, I want to know these chapters. The New Covenant Promise.
Deuteronomy 30.
Yes. Deuteronomy 30.
Ezekiel 36.
Ezekiel 36.
Jeremiah 31.
See,
And Hebrews 8.
he got them all, folks. On what chapter do we find the Son of Man receiving the kingdom? From the Ancient of Days.
Daniel 7.
Daniel 7. What about the end of the age in Jerusalem related?
Matthew 24.
And
Mark 16 and Luke 21.
okay, it's good that you could go to the other chapters, but in Matthew I would have said Matthew 24 and 25. That's where, if you don't know you're talking about the second coming of Christ, you end up with the rapture. What's wrong with these pictures? Well, we already know. This is what universally folks who are interested in the tabernacle are going to come up with because they don't know anything about the background. Right? And I think the background is more interesting than what you get.
They don't get the hollow square concept.
Yeah. And therefore, they're not going to be able to relate it because they don't know how Egyptian armies
Right.
camped in the 18th and 19th dynasty.
And of course, they probably never saw the symbol on the right.
Yeah, they probably never seen a pectoral. And even if they did, it wouldn't dawn on them, oh, wait a minute.
And if they read the description out of, I believe, Exodus, it would have said 4 rows of 3, or was it 3 rows of 4?
It's still describing the hollow square,
Sure.
as long as you know, yes. Yes.
That the rows are around the middle.
Yeah, well, yes, around the middle instead of, yeah. Yeah. What are these guys doing?
Practicing the protection against arrows.
Arrows. This is called the turtle. The tortoise, yes, the tortoise. Right. And what symbol does that relate to? Well, the guy with the bow,
Yes.
which is the first,
White horse.
The white horse.
which is the
Revelation 5. First the 4 horses.
first seal. Revelation 6, 4 and 5 are the throne room, right? And where he starts to open the seals is chapter 6. Okay, this one is easy. Start from the bottom. What's down there at the bottom?
The temple in the courtyard.
Yeah, that's the temple on earth. What's just above it?
Temple in heaven.
The temple in heaven. Yeah, Ray, I can see that didn't come through. And now, who's on either side?
The 2 olive trees of witnesses.
The 2 witnesses, the 2 olive trees, and
2 lampstands.
The 2 lampstands.
2 lampstands. Where is that found?
Revelation 11.
Yep. Okay, what is this? We're at War Camp of Israel. 3 separate things in Revelation. Okay,
The New Jerusalem.
right?
12 gates.
12 gates, yep. 12 foundations as soon as you say 12 gates.
Right.
12 apostles,
12 tribes.
12 tribes or patriarchs, chapter 7. The 144,000 in the perfect square on Mount Zion, chapter 14. All right. This is the Nero coin, right? What chapter is the symbol in?
13.
All right. What does it say? Well, it says Neron Kaiser on the left, and on the right it says Sardinion. Right? CA, capital P is an R, the D is a D, I, the delta is a D, I, A, N, O, N. Well, we know what this is. This is from Tutankhamun's tomb. This is a box Howard Carter took pictures of, showing us how the ark was actually carried, right?
Mhm.
What's this?
Chimera.
Chimera. Okay, this is the burning, right? What symbol? Well, the big symbol would be the imperial beast. That's a leopard, a bear, right?
Mhm.
Leopard,
Some
bear.
locusts, some horses in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the things that are wrong with this little image you could buy, what would you say?
Poles in the wrong place for starters.
Yeah, they're on the ends instead of along the sides.
Yeah.
What else?
The,
Poles don't retract like they.
Yeah,
normally do.
the fact that there are poles on the sides at all is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
the angels on top, the cherubim, probably didn't look like
No, they didn't look like that. That's the wrong cherubim. That's, there is a picture there somewhere of the most holy place in Solomon's temple where you've got actual cherubim. What's this?
Babylon.
the seed of the beast.
Yes. Darkness over its kingdom.
Dark.
Chapter 16. Right? Who are these people?
This is the Roman Senate.
Yeah, this is a small part of the 600-member Roman Senate. Who got into trouble with them and paid for it?
Oh, Julius Caesar, Gaius Caligula, Nero, among others.
Yes, well, I didn't know if you realized that this isn't really about Hall. It's about who came first? Who first ran afoul of them?
Oh, Julius Caesar.
Yes. Yes. Then?
Well, and we know of Caligula,
Yes, then Caligula. Then
Nero.
Nero. Then?
Domitian.
Yes,
Oh,
Domitian.
Domitian.
That's the whole point, Ray. Yeah. So, and I said to you before, there's no excuse for Domitian having this happen. He knew about Julius Caesar. He certainly knew about Caligula, and he definitely knew about Nero. Right? The reason his father came to power was because Nero was put to death by the Senate. He should have said, I've got to figure out some way to work with these people and get them to do what I want without them coming to kill me. He didn't retire from being the Roman emperor.
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Great white throne.
It's the Great White Throne Judgment. I see the book is open, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And the other one isn't open. It's the Lamb's Book of Life. And who's all these people down here?
Great multitude.
No, not the great multitude,
The
Ray.
lost.
This is the lost. Chapter?
1.
Yeah. What is this? What is it?
I'm going to say it's the Arch of Triumph, but that's in Paris.
Yeah.
But
The one in Paris was copied from this.
yes,
And the one in Washington Square was copied from this.
I don't remember what it's called.
Oh, shame.
I know.
It's the Arch of Titus.
Titus.
And where is it?
It's in Rome.
It's in Rome. More specifically, it's in the Roman Forum. What does it memorialize? Well, yes, the capture of Jerusalem. What does it contain that's significant for our purposes?
It shows what a trumpet and
Show-
a lampstand.
It shows what lampstands and trumpets look like. And so the 7 trumpets in the 7th seal are directly related to this. Okay? Oh, this is fun. There's the cathedral, and there's the Lateran Palace. Why is that significant?
It was part of the donation of Constantine.
Yeah, 320, 321,
5-ish.
323, somewhere in there. Yeah, and this isn't that palace. That palace there are ruins of in the back that I could have taken a picture of. This is from the Middle Ages, but the reason that it's significant is this is the showing that temporal power began long before 538.
Yes.
Okay, and for that matter, it didn't end. And so, what other palace could I have shown?
Time for a review.
Nobody can see the other palace. The palace where the Pope ruled the Papal States through to 1870, showing that temporal power of the papacy did not end in 1798. And then, of course, their temporal power was transferred to the Vatican. But you can't get that.
Can't get that name out of my mouth.
Well, maybe if you spoke Latin or even a little Italian, it would come out. Find out who that is. I'll throw this slide in again. Okay, where's this found today? Where are all these cities founded? Turkey. What's this woman doing?
She's flying to the wilderness on the two wings of the great eagle, serpent in chapter 12.
Okay. How about this one, Smarty Pants?
This is also chapter 12. It's
Yeah.
War in heaven.
Okay, so who is the figure with the sword?
Michael the Archangel.
That's Michael, the ruling angel. What does Michael mean?
Who is like God?
Who is like God? Okay. How did you do on the quiz? All right, that's fun. Look at that. We got it 2 minutes of 5, right where we going to be. So, come back to me, Ray, so I can tell the people goodbye. All right, we put the Lord's blessing on you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace.